Hey everyone, I am hopping on YouTube today to tell you about a new project I'm going to be working on that I'm very excited about. And so I will start by explaining a little bit of how I got here. If you have not fallen down the rabbit hole of dress and fashion history on YouTube, good for you, because you probably have a lot more free time in your life right now than I do, because I had been spending just a ridiculous amount of time watching videos about the history of fashion, the history of sewing, the history of garment making. I don't know how I got here, but needless to say, it has taken up quite a bit of my free time recently. And there's a YouTuber in particular who I have been watching named Bernadette Banner. You can click here and hop over to her channel if you want to check it out. So Bernadette is a dress historian, and on her YouTube channel, she does some sort of fashion history myth busting, and then she also does a lot of videos about recreating historical fashions and creating, designing, making garments inspired by historical garments. It is wildly entertaining, but again, if you value your free time, you might not want to click on that link. All this to say that watching all of her amazing content has given me the push I need to tackle a project that I have been planning to do for at least a decade. I am, of course, just a baby sewist, so I am definitely not tackling that kind of historical project. And my project is probably more, vintage than historical. And it is knitting. And that is, I have always, almost since I began knitting seriously, wanted to recreate Paul McCartney's iconic Fair Isle jumper as seen in this photo. This is a photo taken in 1970 by his wife Linda on their farm in Kintyre, Scotland. So this is after the Beatles broke up, you can tell by the facial hair. And Paul and his family were able to get away for a bit. And I have not been able to find a lot of information about this garment, because rock stars don't usually sit around talking with interviewers about their knitwear. So I'm going to be recreating this entirely from the photo. I'm going to be making some assumptions about it as I work, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So why this sweater? I became a big fan of the Beatles in the mid-1990s. My parents did not like the Beatles for whatever reason. Although I will note that my dad recently borrowed our Disney Plus login so he could watch the Get Back documentary. So apparently things have changed. But when I was a teenager and suddenly got really into the Beatles, he had no interest in them. And neither did my mom. But my mom's brother was a big fan of the Beatles. So he got his kids, or at least my cousin that was my age, into the Beatles. And he made me cassette copies of all of their albums, and I was, I guess, about 15 when this all started. And so, of course, I was completely insufferable about it, as teenagers usually are, about the things that they become interested in or obsessed with. So I was just all Beatles all the time. I even managed to talk my sophomore year English professor into letting me do my research paper for the year on the poetry of John Lennon. So yeah, I was a little bit overboard. I have since scaled things back, but I am still a big fan of the Beatles. And I actually do still collect original Beatles albums on vinyl and weird offbeat Beatles albums. I have some that my husband picked up for me in Mexico City, which are not their regular standard issue albums, but like weird albums compiling all of their, random songs and then translating the titles into Spanish, even though the music is still in English. Anyway, so I remain a big fan of the Beatles, and this photo of Paul McCartney is just so iconic. In this amazing Fair Isle sweater. This was, again, in 1970, so that's a solid 50 years ago. I'm going to go ahead and call that vintage. And I don't know how the production of Fair Isle jumpers was accomplished at this point in history. Did somebody hand knit his jumper? Was it machine knit? Is it actually from the Shetland Isles, since the photo was taken in Scotland? I don't know any of these things because, again, there's no information about this sweater other than the fact that the photo was taken by his wife in 1970 in Scotland. So I'm going to be making some assumptions. Obviously, I'm not going to be machine knitting. I'm going to be hand knitting, and I'm going to be documenting the process here on the Media Peruana Knits YouTube channel. I expect this to be a long-term project because, of course, I have lots of other knitting projects going on, because I have always suffered from startitis, which, if you have maybe stumbled across this video and are not a knitter, I always end up starting new projects without finishing the old ones. And because there is just going to be a lot of work involved here. I need to source the yarn. I need to chart the different patterns. And if you look closely, I'll include a link to the actual photo that you can find online, so you can take a closer look if you want. But there is almost no repetition. There are maybe one or two patterns that repeat, but for the most part, especially the large motifs, they do not repeat. So each one is individual and unique. So I have to chart all of that, and then I have to do all of the fun of gauge and figuring out stitch counts. I have never designed anything with a steek, and this is obviously going to be a steeked project. For the neck and the armholes, there will be steeks there. And then I need to make some decisions about how I want to keep with the original sweater as my guide, but also make it fit me, a woman, not Paul McCartney, a man, which may involve some shaping or other changes to the pattern. So again, this is probably going to be a long-term project, and I will be documenting it here on YouTube. I know I'm not the first person to ever attempt this. I know for a fact that Allison, whose last name I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce, and I am so sorry, Allison Dijkhuizen, sorry, formerly of Holland Knits and now knitting instructor extraordinaire, is or was also working on a reproduction of this. And I have also seen a couple of other online attempts to reproduce this sweater. So I'm not the first. I'm sure I will not be the last, but I'm still excited. A project I'm really excited about, and I'm going to be sharing with you here on YouTube. This is going to be a series of vlogs that are separate from the regular podcast. So if you have no interest in watching this process, you won't have to worry about it. It will be kept entirely separate from the regular Eel and Stitch podcast and from all of the other tutorials and videos that I have here on the channel. So all that to say, my first step is going to be sourcing some yarn. I'm going to go ahead and assume that this is Shetland wool, and the most likely candidate for yarn is probably going to be Jamieson's Shetland Spindrift, but we shall see. I am going to look around and see what I can find, and then probably order some color cards, as I don't want to rely on just trying to figure out the colors from the internet, just because computer monitors, you know, you just never know how close you're getting. So I do want to go ahead and order some color cards and maybe get those colors as close as possible. So stay tuned for more if you are interested in watching how I reconstruct this iconic Fair Isle jumper, as the Brits say, once sported by Paul McCartney, and hopefully in the future sported by me.